straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Yeah, g'day Matthew. Here we are again, and a lot to get through this week, a huge amount. But firstly, let's start with a nice story. Mick Picton. Morning, Mick.
Yeah, g'day Mick and Gloria, of course. It was actually a really nice story. Mick rang me during the week and he said, Matty, you're around. Have you got 10 minutes just to catch up with someone? I've got someone special here for you to meet. And I went, sure. I was actually in Sydney when he spoke to me, but I was back in Dubbo the next day. And so I went and visited him at the Cultural Centre, but he had two people with him. He had Wataru Koketsu and Saku Koketsu. Now, the sister city relationship started with Minokamo in 1989. 2nd of June 1989, that relationship was first signed.
With the late Tony McGrain.
With 1989, would have been before Tony McGrain. Tony McGrain became mayor in 1991, so I reckon that would have been with Squadron Leader Tom Slattery.
All right, yep.
Yeah, at a guess, I'd have to go and check who was mayor in 1989, but I think it would have been Tom Slattery. And so that was signed, and then student exchanges started maybe the next year, but maybe 2 years after that. Wataru Koketsu was an exchange student that came across in 1991. So either the first or the second group of exchange students that came across to Dubbo. He stayed at Mick and Gloria Picton's place back in 1991. And Mick told me the story that his daughter came home from school one day and said, they were talking at school about taking exchange students, so I put my hand up to take one. Is that okay? So Mick and Gloria went, are you sure? That's fine. So Wataru stayed with them. He would have been maybe 14 at the time or thereabouts. And he's actually kept in touch on a ad hoc casual basis over the years. He did come to Dubbo once a few years after that. He said he was going through his university career and he ended up just in Australia. So he came and visited Dubbo back in about 1998. Hasn't been here since then, but came along, wanted to show his son a bit of Australia, a bit of Dubbo in particular, wanted to talk to his son about that. So his 9-year-old son, Saku, came along with him, and he's got his wife and an older son back in Japan. They couldn't make it this trip, but he said that's a future plan to bring them out. But it was just really nice for him to come along, say thank you to Gloria Mick, and of course Gloria Mick put him up again. So all these years later, they put him up again, and really just to talk about it. But one of the things that he said to me really struck home with me. He said he was a very shy 14-year-old when he came across to Australia back in 1991. And it was all a bit nerve-wracking and he wasn't sure whether he should be doing it. He did it. He was very well looked after. The exchange program works really well. And he said a few years later he'd finished school and he was looking at what to do with university. And he said, I actually wanted to go to university in America. And he said, I didn't think I would have had the confidence if I hadn't already been overseas, hadn't already realised that people are welcoming, people are open to someone coming along from Japan. He said, so I thought about that experience I had in Dubbo, and he said, I think I can do this. So he said he wasn't sure about this whole experience to America, but he said the confidence I had out of the experience of being in Dubbo, he said that gave me the confidence to explore the world much further. So I went to America, had a great time at university, et cetera, His life's gone ahead and he's been very successful in his life, but he still remembers Dubbo as an important part of that process.
That is a great story.
Yeah, it was really nice. And again, his son probably didn't realise the significance of all this. He thought, Dubbo's a nice place. But his dad certainly talked about some of the changes. So we met at the Cultural Centre, so that didn't exist. That was still being used as a high school way back when he was here. So that's obviously changed dramatically. He probably didn't remember it as a high school. But he certainly talked about how much Dubbo's grown and how much busier it is and a whole range of things. So that sister city relationship we have does a whole range of things at a whole range of different levels, but even there's one individual that's had their life changed by just that whole experience.
Well, Renewables are back and there was a regional leaders meeting regarding renewables. What's happening there?
Well, I didn't know they'd gone anywhere. When you say they're back, they've still been around, they've been hanging around, they're still continuing on. But it's really important to make sure that we have good communication. And I was invited to join a group. It's called the Regional Leaders Network, and it's an Australia-wide group. And we basically meet every month, and I was not available for the first meeting, so this is the second meeting of this group. So meet once a month effectively, just to talk about how we can maximise the benefits. And this is the big thing, and I talk about it a lot around this area. If we get it right from a council perspective, we will fundamentally change the economy of Wellington as a result of the renewables we've got in this area. Now, how do we do that? A whole range of different ways, but one of the things I guarantee we need to do is talk to other areas to find out what they're doing, how they're approaching it, and you learn from that, they learn from you. In fact, in the meeting the other day, there's one of the people on this particular meeting was someone from Wellington, but not Wellington that's part of our LGA, Wellington in Victoria. So they actually talked about it, and on the meeting, I didn't realise this, they said, Matt, I just want to thank you and your council. You've got a framework, a set of guidelines that we have for a planning agreement to try and get 1.5% out of renewable providers, proponents. And he said, we heard about that. We contacted your staff. They sent us a copy, which we've said to our staff, anyone that wants a copy, they can have a copy. And we're using that with our negotiations with proponents. So already from their perspective, they saw that Dubbo had been a leader and Dubbo was actually helping them out down in Wellington in Victoria. So even things like that, where we share that information, because the proponents will come along, and if they can, they'll pay nothing to a local council. If they don't have to, why are you going to volunteer to give money away? Our job as a council is to say it's in your best interest to look after the community to give some of this money away, and let's do it in a structured process way. So again, all of these different things, you're working on how you can deliver benefits to the community. This Renewable Regional Leaders Network, I'm not sure exactly what they're going to deliver, but I can guarantee just by having people from across the nation talking, we'll gain something.
Indeed. Couldn't agree with you more. Okay, here we go. Upgrades to the Obley Road. I can hear people cheering as I speak, and basically there's quite a bit to be done. Is that the case?
That is the case, definitely right. Now, this is all to do with ASM. This is Australian Strategic Materials. People often call it the Dubbo Project or the Toongai Mine. Now, it's probably a bit frustrating for ASM and a bit frustrating for us as a community that it's taking a long time to get there. The latest number they need is approximately $1.7 billion in guaranteed investment, and they're going quite well. They've got some good investments. They've announced those publicly, so I'm not telling any secrets here. So they're probably getting up close to $1.5 billion of guaranteed investment so far with different companies around the world and the Australian government as well. But one of the things that they have to do before they can start the project is upgrade Obley Road. And from a council perspective, we've got to deal with them on that. We're not paying for it. It's their cost. They've got $20 million to spend on Obley Road.
Okay, where are they going to spend it?
Well, they're going to spend it in a few different areas. The first place they're going to spend it is from the Newell Highway across the front of the zoo and all the way around Obley Road to Camp Road.
Oh,
so they're going.
It's a large area.
It is a large area. And so that'll be done with asphalt. The idea here is to reduce the amount of noise traffic makes so it doesn't have an impact on the animals. So when you've got you've got trucks going along there, and this will be B doubles at some point in time, when you've got those B doubles going along there, that creates a lot of noise just on the existing bitumen that you've got there, but asphalt is obviously much quieter.
It'll make it quieter, and it'll keep the rhinos happy because they're close to the road, and I think that's a great idea. Okay, so it goes out to Camp Road. I understand, though, somewhere else there's going to be a bridge involved.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with Hyandra Creek. Now, Hyandra Creek at the moment, I know friends...
It's a big dip.
That's exactly right, yeah. So it's probably a culvert would be the best way I describe it. It's not a bridge, definitely not a bridge. And it is a bit dangerous. You kind of come around a corner and you go over a bit of a rise and then you come down in that big dip. And I've got some friends that live out there, so I'm out there occasionally. And it is somewhere where if you don't know that road well, then that could be a bit dangerous. And when you've got B doubles going along there, that B double is not going to go through that dip at a reasonable speed. It may even struggle to go through that dip full stop. So that's another area that they've got to clean up. And that will be a bridge that they'll put in there to replace that. The downside of all this, Richard, of course, is there's going to be interruptions to the traffic for people that live out Obley Road, anyone that drives on Obley Road, but the residents out there will be impacted the most. And that was one of the discussions we had with ASM. They said, well, what do we do with residents? Do we do a little bit at a time and then give them a break, a little bit at a time, give them a break, or do we just go and try and do it all at once? And essentially we said communication with the residents is essential and basically letting them know. Now, most people are happy they're going to have a road improved as a result of this, but obviously it's an interruption to their day-to-day life.
Yeah, but in the past on Obley Road, there have been bridges further down. We've had to drive into the creek bed while they built the bridge anyway.
Yeah.
That's happened further down on Obley Road, so I can't see there's much, people will obviously accept what's happening with this bridge. the ultimate outcome being U-Butte for everybody.
A better road, that's exactly right.
That's exactly right.
And not at council expense, which is good. So not
Which is even better.
That's right, not at ratepayers' expense.
Okay, while we're talking about roads, very quickly, where are we at with Saxa at this stage, the Saxa Road?
Yeah, so that's basically proceeding. We've got the money that we know from the federal government we've talked about. We've got the tender has basically gone out and been approved. We've selected a tenderer from that. It's really just a process, Richard, that I suspect, I don't have the exact time frame, but I suspect by about April next year, you'll have that bridge across the Kumabella crossing there, because it's a design and construct bridge. It's a big project there. And that'll be the same with the Hyandra crossing. It'll probably be a pretty similar bridge that will be built there. So it's going to take some time to build.
Yes.
And the big question for ASM is, do they do a complete road realignment? So the bridge won't be on a new road alignment, or do they put the bridge in the existing road alignment and then, as you said, try and get some sort of creek crossing? Because it's a pretty steep creek there, so that'd be a pretty tough job to put a little creek crossing in. They've got to work all that out. I suppose the information here is really about Obley Road residents. Be aware that at some stage in the near future, your road will have some interruptions, and then some stage after that, your road will be improved.
Improved, indeed. Well, we have 8 apartments for a short-term stay in Dubbo, opening in Bourke Street. I believe you were there for the opening. This is a great idea. Doctors, magistrates, other public servants just wanting to stay for a short time, work for a week and then clear out and go somewhere else. Good idea.
It's a funny thing. Many years ago, one of my children at school had to do a school project about the jobs that their parents did, their mum or dad or both their parents did. And so my daughter did a PowerPoint presentation that had lots of pictures of me cutting ribbons or cutting cakes. And so the impression of the mayor for that particular class at school was all the mayor does is cut ribbons and cut cakes. And I never know which one I'm going to do. When I go to an opening, I never know whether I'm going to cut a ribbon or cut a cake. Well, on this particular one, 75A Bourke Street, the French Corner apartments were opened up. They had a ribbon and a cake. So I got to do both on the same time.
Terrific.
So what I thought was good about this was that it just shows the confidence that people have in Dubbo, in the economy of Dubbo, and what's happening in Dubbo. And that confidence, obviously it doesn't come cheap to go and do building works at the moment. We know that building prices are going up higher than CPI. So you've got to have confidence in investing in Dubbo. If you're going to invest somewhere, you want to make sure that you think there's a future there. And this particular one, I take on board the point that you made that different people that will use it. I actually think there'll be some doctors that will use this as well, because it's not too far away from the hospital, both the private hospital and the main hospital, the public hospital there. So I think it'll be used by a lot of people. So 8 short stay apartments. They're available on various booking. I'm not going to do an ad for them or anything, but they're available on normal booking sites that you'd go to. But again, I like the fact that it's just more accommodation available, and whether it be long-term accommodation, short-term accommodation, it's confidence in our market. So that's really important, I think.
Well, now, Matt, there is a men's healing group in Wellington, and they're trying to help people in the Wellington area, I believe, regarding employment and other social issues.
There's a group called the Yindyamarra Healing Men's Group in Wellington. The person who runs it's Jeff Amato, and I've come across Jeff in different things before. I've always been pretty impressed, actually, with what Jeff's done. I think he's got a good attitude, and he takes an attitude that we need to get his people, so he's Aboriginal, he wants to get his people to make lives better for themselves, but not by putting their hand out and getting a handout, make lives better for themselves by actually getting in and making an effort and improving themselves. Now, I can't talk about what was spoken about at this particular yarn up.
I understand.
And it was emphasised that this is a safe space. People can come along and share whatever they want to share. And there were lots of very deep and some pretty serious stuff that was shared at that yarn up. And I feel pretty privileged that I sat around with a group of maybe 20 Aboriginal guys who were sharing some pretty deep and sometimes emotional stuff, and as a white person, I felt pretty honoured to be there. The Deputy Mayor, Richard Ivey, was there as well, and our CEO, Murray Wood, was there as well. And again, it did feel like an honour to be there, because normally you wouldn't be allowed to come along to these as a white person. It was really about healing for Aboriginal people. What I did like that was happening there, a few things. there was one person there who had an association with one of the renewable energy providers, and he talked about the job opportunities for everyone, including Aboriginal people, at some of the renewables. And so I think that was really important to show them that there was a path forward, a path out, and just to get them ready for employment. So, for example, they talked about how you go and get a white card. Now, a white card basically allows you to get onto a construction site. It's probably a one-day course. I'm only guessing.
It is. I've done it.
Yeah, right. There you go. So it's a one-day course, is it?
Yep.
Yeah, right. So you do that at a TAFE, for example, and once you've done that, that's all the safety protocols. That allows you to go on a construction site. You can't go and do work for the renewables without at least a white card. You might need some other skills as well. But just talking about these skills, and those jobs are there now, and that's the important part here.
Yep.
Some of this work is available right now. So just talking about that, but also this men's group talked about the fact they want to do some lawn mowing business in Wellington. Lots of people who need lawn mowing. It's something that's pretty easy for them to get started. It's a pretty simple business. They don't need a lot of equipment. They've already sourced a lawn mower and a whippy snipper, and that can get these guys just, I know it sounds sad, but get these guys used to a routine of going to work. So you turn up in the morning, you go and do your job for the day, you go home at night, just that routine, so that when a renewable provider comes along, because one of the points that was made was that sometimes the renewables will have a First Nations employment process where they've given some sort of guarantee to the government they'll have a certain minimum employment. It might be 3 months, or it might be a certain number or a certain ratio. And one of the comments was made that sometimes what has happened is they'll employ Aboriginal people for 3 months, and at the end of that they say, thanks very much, I've ticked that box.
Yeah.
Now I'll go and employ some backpackers.
Yeah.
And it was emphasised there on the day that if you get the 3 months worth of work, make it so that your work is so effective, you're turning up on time, you're doing great work, that at the end of 3 months, they would even think about saying, thanks very much, I've ticked the box now, I want you to keep working permanently because you've done such great work. Huge opportunity here, and I've mentioned this before, the governor at the Corrective Centre, that in one of the projects that's going ahead now with one of the solar farms, it's literally across the road from the correctional centre.
Yeah.
There are two of those gentlemen that live in the correctional centre. They're in the correctional centre now for deeds they've committed in the past, that work in Dubbo at the moment. They get picked up at the moment every morning, driven to Dubbo, they work, driven back home and stay in the correctional centre. So I've talked to the governor there and said, across the road there's a project that will need hundreds of people. Surely that would be a fantastic way to get people in the correctional centre used to the idea of getting up in the morning, they get walked across the road or in a minibus, whatever it might be, and they do work for a day and come home and stay in the jail at night. Again, that routine. They get out of jail, they then get that routine. No, well, I've got a job already. I know I've got a job. I used to stay in the jail. I now stay at somewhere in Wellington, and I go to work each morning. And they've got money in their pocket. They don't need to go and commit any crimes. They've got money, and hopefully they've got that routine. So I think really valuable, really important. And I keep talking about the value of the renewables to change the economy of Wellington. I think the value of the renewables can also change the fundamental social fabric of Wellington and get some of these Aboriginal guys, and not just Aboriginal guys, but everyone that might be without work at the moment and not accustomed to working, they can fundamentally change their lives.
I think it's a great idea. Just on the white card, the only reason you've got to do a white card is basically around safety, and that's essential.
Yep.
And as I said, it's a day course. I had to do it because I was going onto work sites with looking after students on work experience.
Yeah. So,
but the white card, don't worry about it. It's there. It's positive. It's designed for safety.
Yeah, and so it's just little things like that, just understanding what you've got to do, and that's where these groups can be really powerful. Because some of the discussion around there was talking about how do we do it? What's the next step forward for us? So I think a really positive thing, and well done to Jeff. I think he's doing a great job down there.
Well, here we go again. Upcoming council elections in September and activity already during May. And I believe it is in association with trying to encourage more women to get into councils.
Well, there was one meeting that was held. These are all pre-candidate information sessions. One meeting that was held already on Saturday, the 4th of May. So people listening to this will have missed that one, obviously, but that was just one. That was a Women for Election organisation, so encouraging women, obviously.
Good.
But there's a range of pre-candidate information sessions that are coming up. If you go to Your Say on our website, then you can see those different information sessions. And I would encourage as many people as possible. lots of people have got things to say about council. Lots of people have got things that they want to change, they want to do. I'd encourage those people to put their hands up and stand for election. But before you do that, just get a bit of an idea of what it might involve. So these pre-candidate information sessions are typically run by organisations external to council. So local government, New South Wales, for example, is running some of those. They're running some at the end of the month. We facilitate them. We have somewhere for them to put them on. We might advertise them, for example. It's obviously not, it doesn't make sense for councillors to run these sessions, but you've often got ex-councillors, former councillors that are there as part of the sessions to explain some of the things. But it's really just to open people's eyes up, because sometimes people say, I couldn't do that, I don't have the time to do that. And then when you understand that, well, most of the work you do is after hours, our council meetings are after hours, our workshops are after hours. Sure, there's some things that might happen during the day from time to time, but as much as possible, our staff will manage with councillors, because they've normally got a job they're working, so manage that with after hours work. And it's really just finding the time to read some of the information. There's a lot of reading in there, but just getting a handle on it rather than just think I couldn't do it. Go along and actually attend some of these sessions and find out what they're about. So have a look on Your Say. Again, I'd encourage as many people as possible. It's a good, healthy democracy when we've got a lot of people that stand for council. And then hopefully out of that, you get a really good group of councillors out of a really good group of candidates.
Okay, Matt, the budget is out, and there's lots of highlights that you've indicated for Dubbo, for Wellington and for the villages. And can we go through a few of the highlights? I noticed that the River Street Bridge is one for Dubbo. The River Street West Collector Road, you might like to explain that to people.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll go through a few things if you like. So this is our budget. It's now on display, so we encourage people to go and have a look at it. Submissions are taken until the 3rd of June.
Yep.
So definitely go along, have a look at it. Now, it's a big document, hundreds of pages. We're talking about a budget of operating expenditure in the order of $180 million. So it's big. And I wrote my mayoral memo this week on the budget, and I said it's really quite similar. What we do is quite similar to a household budget. I might be sitting there, and the example I gave was I might want a new TV, but I might want to go on a holiday with the family. Do I spend that couple of $1,000s on the new TV, or do I spend that couple of $1,000s on the family holiday? I can't do both. I've got a finite amount of money, and I've saved up for this. Which one do I do? And it's the same with council. The numbers are bigger, $180 million. Not many household budgets are $180 million.
Exactly.
But it's the same type of thing. Do I spend money on that new thing, on that new asset, for example? Do I spend money on some new services? I can't spend it on everything. Now, what we typically find during the submission process is people put in submissions and say, can you give us this? Well, I want new something, or I want some other extra service. And I encourage people to do that, but also look at where you might take the money from. Because, again, we don't have a magic bottomless pit that we put our hand in and pull some money out. If we give in one area, we've got to take from somewhere else. How do we do that? What's the best way to do it? So I'll run through a few different parts to give people an idea. And I'll come back to your River Street West Collector Road in a moment. $31.75 million is what we've allocated at this stage in our draft budget for urban and rural road construction and reconstruction. Now, you remember back in our old days on council, Stuart McLeod was the Director for Technical Services, and he always used to say that he had the most money, he had the biggest budget, and you can see why. $31.75
It always
million.
has been, always will be, yeah.
That's right. Out of the $180 million, that amount just on roads, basically. So when people say, why don't you fix the roads? Well, there's $31.75 million that's going towards fixing the roads. $6.31 million for bridge improvements.
Whereabouts?
That includes the Burrendong Bridge number 1, Molong Street Bridge in Stewarttown, Kimabella Bridge on Saxa Road, and design work for the Ullamogo Creek Bridge and the Forest Vale Road culvert replacement at Gollan. There's also $1.48 million for recreation structures and sporting facilities, such as the Lady Cutler PA upgrade, Victoria Park number 2 and number 3 irrigation renewal, completing the John McGrath irrigation renewal, the Mumble Shade Sale, the Elston Park Water Park renewal, Riverbank North Fitness Centre, Victoria Park toilets, and a lot more. $286,000 on CCTV camera renewal. We've got a lot of CCTV cameras in both Dubbo and Wellington, but some of those I remember would have been back when you and I were on council together. They were put in back in those days, so things have changed a lot. Some of those cameras are getting to the stage their end of life.
Oh, yeah.
Or the quality has improved quite dramatically now.
Yes, which is good.
So we've got money set aside for community safety and crime prevention plan. We're doing our service review still. So if I get on to what you mentioned in particular, River Street West Collector Road, $4.52 million and $10.3 million for the Newell Highway and River Street West intersection. Now, the River Street Bridge, you mentioned the River Street Bridge, that's not a council project, that's a state government project. A whole range of opinions, whether that's good, bad or indifferent, I'm not going to enter those.
Nope.
We don't control it. What we do control is the northwest urban area. That's the whole expansion that we've talked about, which is a great area that's not far from the CBD of Dubbo, but I think an area we can do some pretty exciting things, and we've got our plans and what we're going to do there. We need to get some connectivity to that area, to the River Street Bridge, the entrance onto the River Street Bridge. So that $10.3 million allocated there is to basically have an intersection onto that bridge. Now, we'll do that intersection before we need it because it makes sense to do it now while the River Street Bridge is happening. If we did it later, you could easily double.
More disruption, yeah.
More disruption, more cost. So it makes sense to do it now before that's in operation. And then that $4.52 million for River Street West Collector Road is essentially the road that will feed off there, which will be, as the name suggests, a collector road. It'll be a main thoroughfare through that whole northwest urban expansion area there. Obviously, smaller roads will come off that.
Okay, the contentious one is the Blue Ridge Link Road, Stage 1, which means in relation to that, there was a map and people can work out the map, but it will at one stage allow trucks to go through a bit of an urban area for a while until we get Stage 2 done. That's a bit of a worry. The other thing is, where's the money going? Are we going to see some further work on Wheelers Lane from the roundabout, say down to the end of St John's School?
From Wheelers Lane through to St Mary's, you mean?
No. I'm talking about, say, Bunnings to the end of...
Sheraton Road you're talking about,
Sheraton
not
Road.
Wheelers Lane.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but Sheraton Road in relation to the Blue Ridge, because you're keeping trucks off Sheraton Road, which wasn't designed for trucks anyway.
So a few things there. So $3 million in the budget's been allocated for Blue Ridge Link Road Stage 1.
Yeah.
The idea here is that at the moment you've got a quarry, you've got trucks that go along Sheraton Road, and that's been happening for some time, obviously. But once Boundary Road was opened up, suddenly that was exposed that part of Sheraton Road was being damaged by trucks, and then obviously cars came along there, and it wasn't great for that sort of traffic.
We fixed it. You fixed a bit of it.
But it's only a short-term fix because the long-term plan is that directly off the Mitchell Highway will feed, and that will be Stage 2, directly off the Mitchell Highway will feed a Blue Ridge Link Road, and that will feed straight through to those quarries and go through some of that extra Blue Ridge development area. Stage 1 is to take the trucks off Sheraton Road and feed them through Blue Ridge. Now, I wouldn't say through an urban area. Those roads through Blue Ridge have been designed for heavier traffic.
I understand that, but at one stage they've got to swing off into to get back on the highway because Stage 2 won't be completed, for what you said last week, I think, another 18 months after the first stage is completed.
Yeah, so
you're going to have some disruption.
Well, not disruption. I think the traffic that will go through Blue Ridge is traffic that will be designed to go through Blue Ridge. So it'll actually go through Blue Ridge. Some people in there aren't happy about that. So there's no doubt about that. I've had some discussions with people there. But that's the idea that, and I think the timelines I gave last week were about 18 months before that would be going, and then about 18 months after that would be when we get that final Blue Ridge Link Road through to the highway itself. So that's the plan at this stage. And then once we get the traffic off Sheraton, that's when we can go and do that work that you were talking about there on Sheraton to get that to the stage it needs to be at, knowing that we're not going to have trucks that are going to blow up that road as such. So that's where we've allocated that money so far, that $3 million. Now, again, this is a draft budget. People can put their thoughts and views in. Maybe people don't want that money spent in Blue Ridge because they don't want to take it off there, leave it until the second stage is done. That's an option that people could look at there. We're working through all of those things there. We've got $412,000 for footpath renewals, $276,000 to do some upgrades at the pool. Yep. So lots of things there. And then if I go a bit further out...
let's look at the villages in Wellington. The villages, it seems to me... Geary's getting their water treatment plant looked at. Mumble also getting their water looked at, which is good to see. And the $1.2 $1.2 million for the Benolong Street Bridge at Stewarttown.
$1 million for the Geary water treatment plant upgrade, $50,000 for the Mumble water treatment plant, down to, say, $13,000 for Tom Colkin Oval shade sail in Geary. And then in Wellington, we've got $500,000 for the Wellington water treatment plant rehab.
What are you doing there? What's wrong with the Wellington treatment plant at the moment that needs $500,000?
Yeah, lots of things that are wrong with
lots of things.
Wellington water treatment. It's old.
Can you be a bit more specific?
This $500,000 is specifically for the renewal of the sedimentation lagoon. And then so you've got Cameron Park lighting, $65,000 there. A leash-free area, $15,000 for a leash-free area in Wellington. So a fair bit of work being done there. But again, they're just a few little bits and pieces, a few little highlights there. What I encourage people to do is get in there, drill down, and obviously people focus on what's of interest to them. Drill down, send in your information. But again, I encourage you to try and say, if you want money spent in one area, where are we going to take the money from to spend that money in that area? It's a big budget, but again, worthwhile looking through, and this is your opportunity to have your say about it all.
Okay, the Benolong Bridge update. I understand things were supposed to be happening in March, then that was put back to May, and now the bridge update, if you can call it that, is in August. What's going on?
Well, that's a very good question.
Not much.
Less than I would like to see going on, Richard.
Yes,
definitely.
exactly.
I actually rode my bike. I ride my bike out there sometimes. I normally try and ride on dirt areas, but every now and again I'll go for a decent road ride, and I rode my bike out that way. And I'm looking forward to that bridge being updated, because at the moment the current Benolong Bridge is one that I personally walk my bike across. I know some of my friends ride their bike across it, but you've got planks that go along the length of the bridge, and you've got gaps between those planks. And if you just happen to go off the width of the plank to the gap, then your tyre gets stuck in there and you end up on the bridge on your back. So I do take the soft option,
Smart
Richard.
move.
Well, I get called soft by some of my friends, but I actually stop at the bridge, walk across there, and then get back on my bike and keep riding. So that bridge has obviously got some issues. Now, when we started doing some work out there, we found some structural issues. We had to spend about $100,000 to make it safer, because we actually had a load limit on there for a time, and still a load limit now, but also a speed limit on that bridge. So the sooner we get this fixed up, the better. But when I was out there riding recently, I saw the sign and it said open by March. And I went, that's right, this is meant to be open by March. So I looked at the sign that said March. I looked at the bridge that still looked like it had some way to go. And I went, this doesn't look great. So I came back to our staff and said, can we work out a timeline for that? And also, we probably need to fix that sign. We don't want to give inaccurate information. So we did actually fix the sign, and the sign got changed to be May 2024. And the information we had from the bridge contractors was that it would be done by May 2024. And here we are by May. And so I chased it up and said, so how are we going? Look, May, we've still got a few weeks to go for May. And the information came back from the bridge contractors and said, well, actually, when we said May, we meant August. So the latest update is that August. Now, what they did tell us, for people that are interested, in that the delays that have been encountered in the bridge construction have included the loss of a specialised subcontractor that does some of the steel fixing. So they had to get another subcontractor to do some of that steel fixing. I think things are busy at the moment in construction in general. So sometimes you're finding that the construction workers that they need on jobs, or in that case, one of the subcontractors just wasn't available. So unfortunately, pushed back to August. But again, as I say so often, Richard, it's not my council. I don't own council. You own council. The community owned council. The information is the information. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, I'll tell people what's going on. Yeah. I don't love it. I don't love the fact that that's been delayed twice. But the information, I can do my best to change it, but I'd rather still communicate with people and tell people this is what's happening.
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation. I've got a quote for something, and we accepted the quote, and then they turned around and said, well, yeah, we could do it. We could have done it. This is 6 weeks ago. Now we've taken on another job, and we will come and see you again in August. Yeah. And these things happen. It's frustrating. Not much you can do about it.
Frustrating for people that live out there, but we did make the right decision. When we first found out about that old bridge needing some work done on it, that was a bit of a discussion at council as to whether we should spend any money on it, or it's only a few months away before the new bridge is there. Really, should we spend money on this old bridge? If we just put detours in place for the time being, that'll be okay. And we had a bit of a discussion with some residents out there, and they weren't keen on the detour idea. So we went ahead and spent that 100 grand. I don't like spending 100 grand on a bridge that you're going to knock down in a very short period of time, but it was absolutely, in hindsight, the right decision to make because we thought the bridge would be already up and going a few months ago, but now that it's August, that would have been all that time residents out there would have had to be detouring, and that would have been a very poor situation for them. So, again, it was a tough decision at the time, but I think we took the right decision.
I'm sure you did. Now, this one does concern me, and we've spoken about this before, and that's the homeless camp and the Regand Park area. Now, there has been an end date for that, and that's basically at the end of this month, May, people will be moved on from that location. My question to you, Mr. Mayor, is this: where do they go?
No idea, and I'll run through a bit of the background there. So obviously there are some people who are living down Regand Park. They've got campsites set up. They've got some tents there.
Yep.
I rode past
clotheslines, tents, everything, quite well settled.
I rode past there the other night because I do ride around that sort of area there, and I could smell a bit of smoke coming from. Obviously, they had a little fire going, cooking or heating. I'm not sure which, but probably a bit of both. So there's a protocol. So we've followed the New South Wales protocol for homeless people in public places. There is a specific protocol for that. And we've been following that protocol, working with some of the agencies, both government and non-government agencies, for the past 6 months. And from time to time, there's been some behaviour down there that's been inappropriate, and so we've had the police involved when we can. There is no longer the power for police just to move people on. If someone's living somewhere, they can't say move people on. And there's kind of a bit of logic to that, because if I say you're living here, move on, well, you just move up the road and live somewhere else. So it doesn't make sense to move people on. If they commit a crime or they're behaving inappropriately, especially I know some females say they don't like running down there now because they feel intimidated by what's down there, and that's sad for society. We don't want that. We love Track O'Reilly. We love people using Track O'Reilly. So essentially we've gone through that process, and we've now gotten to a point that we as council believe we really need to get some more severe action, some more proactive measures in place. Again, we don't have the powers necessarily to do all this. We need the state government to come on board with us and help us with this. So we've identified a 3-week time frame for the people there to receive notice and to move. And then when they move, we want them to have the option of alternative temporary accommodation provided by Homes New South Wales. Okay?
Yes.
As the government
now,
agency.
Are we going to see that accommodation, though? I mean, words are words.
That's right.
We're going to see action on that.
Well, this is the thing.
I mean, I don't want to see people just turfed off there and end up under the bridge or end up somewhere else. Homeless people, quite frankly, are homeless, and they need to be looked after like anybody else.
Exactly
for
right.
whatever reason.
Exactly right. So that's why we've been working with the government agencies to try and get them to have that. So that will be the responsibility of Homes New South Wales. They're the principal agency that's responsible. So we've nominated 22nd of May as the date that we think it's appropriate, after following all the various protocols, after a 6-month time frame approximately. We think that that's appropriate. Now, obviously, there's some sensitivities that surround this, and there's other homeless people in public places as well. So we're trying to work with these agencies to get them to plan this process, and we want to make sure we've got the full support of the colleagues in the state government, because, again, we can't do this on our own. So hopefully this will turn out okay and these people will have somewhere left to live. There's also, again, that whole idea of the risk to our residents that want to use these areas in a public area and a nice area along the river. We want to make sure that those people are looked after and protected as well. So there's the rights of the good law-abiding citizens, and then helping people that are in a homeless situation. And it's a balancing act between the two.
A delicate balancing act, and I hope that people are moved on in a gentle and productive and positive way. I don't know, will the council rangers be involved?
No, I don't think our rangers will be involved. I think this will be something more that the agencies, the state government agencies that are responsible, and I imagine the police would be there as protection for those staff as well, so that if things don't go the way that we would like them to go, there is some law enforcement there on hand. So I hope, and I'm pretty sure we've been working with these state government agencies, I hope that you'll get some good outcomes from this. But I suppose there has been a bit of frustration in the community with people being down there, so I would ask people for their patience. But also, exactly as you said, these people are homeless. If they had a home to go to tomorrow, do you think they'd be choosing to live in a tent by the river, especially as it starts to get colder at night? They're living there because they don't have alternatives, and this is where we're hoping to work with these agencies.
Yeah, and I hope the agencies provide those alternatives, being the end of May, June, July, August, cold, winter, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know whether I want to broach this subject at all, but we've got to talk about it. We spoke about it last week, and that is the land swap, for want of a better reason, between the RSL and Dubbo Regional Council. And you might like to go back a little bit of history with the bowling club and why this land swap took place and what has eventuated since, which is mind-blowing. Basically, it is mind-blowing. The whole thing. It's been in the local paper, it's been everywhere, and nothing seems to have been resolved.
Well, something has been resolved, and as you know, we actually had a council resolution.
Well, you were against the whole thing anyway.
Well, it's kind of irrelevant what my opinion was because...
Well, you've now got to move on.
That's right. And
as a mayor, you've got to move on.
Exactly right. My job is to be the spokesperson for council resolution. So I can have an opinion on something up until the time of the vote, and then once the vote happens, my opinion is irrelevant. I've got to basically be the spokesperson for council resolution. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to look at the vote and see what the vote was, and you can go back and listen to previous podcasts. I don't need to go over that in terms of what my opinion was beforehand. But now we've resolved to basically buy a parcel of land from the RSL club and to sell a parcel of land to the RSL club.
1.5 million.
Correct. And that's a public figure that we've given out for both those. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? We've resolved to buy and sell, and that was based on a letter that came from the RSL club as well that said, here's what we propose based on a whole range of background information. The land swap deal that was done initially, and I'll go back and give a bit of history around that, was done with the land swap. So those two parcels of land were swapped for no exchange of money. Now we're exchanging money, but it's the same amount of money. So it's pretty close to a land swap, isn't it? If you exchange the same amount of money each way.
It sounds better than a land swap.
Well, legally, it's much cleaner.
Yes.
So absolutely right. I'm much happier with paying money in each direction, but you still, the net cost to both organisations is zero still, and you still get the two parcels of land. So let me go back briefly, and I'll just run through this timeline briefly, because one of the things I'm intrigued by is the discussion. The discussion we had last week was about an EOI process for a parcel of land that council owned. It wasn't about any contamination, but the discussion over the last week has been about contamination. And that's where some accusations have been thrown around by the RSL club about the last council, about them knowing about the land being contaminated.
Well, I mean, and this is the point. Where is the contamination? What is the contamination? Have you got any idea? Has council got any idea? And did council know that the land was contaminated before even this land swap was put up?
Well, no, I would say based on the information I have, but I'll run through it all and then you can make your own mind up. So these are based on some cold, hard facts that I've got access to, and people can make their mind up. So I'll go back very briefly. 10th of April 2019, so I'm going back that far now. The RSL Memorial Club, Dubbo RSL Memorial Club Limited, bought 74 Yindyamarra Street. Now, that's the old Dubbo City Bowling Club, often called Dubbo City Bowling Club, often called the Greens, often called 74 Yindyamarra Street. Yep. All the same property. They paid $0 for that. When you look at the price that was paid, if you go and look at the official records of that transfer, they paid $0 for that. Now, the Dubbo City Bowling Club was there. There was obviously some other arrangement of some payment there in some way, shape or form. But the property, what they paid for the property, for the building and the property was $0. On the 22nd of July 2019, council resolved, so this is going back to the last council, resolved to endorse an initial land swap arrangement with the RSL club subject to further report to council. So that's fine. So basically have a discussion about that. So a few months after the RSL club bought it, they said, let's have a look at this idea of doing a land swap. 17th of January 2020, obviously that had progressed some way, and an email that I've got access to and is now essentially in the public domain said that, and this is from one of our staff members to the consultants for the RSL club and to the RSL club themselves, they said, in summary, and they're referring to the Keswick land, so in summary, it was not used as a rubbish tip, but rather inert spoil from nearby projects was dumped in this location. Council has not taken testing of the material, nor has any remediation works been undertaken. The onus is on the RSL as the acquirer to undertake whatever contamination investigations they deem necessary as part of their own due diligence, as council undertook at our expense in relation to the Dubbo City Bowling Club. Now, that was a parcel of land in Keswick, 3.3 hectares, that was suggested by council as part of the land swap. So basically, you've got this parcel of land, the old Dubbo City Bowling Club. We like the idea of council owning that. And here, you might like this other parcel of land for another club that you might want to build there. The accusation from the RSL club now, which I'll get to as we go through the timeline, is that when that land was put forward by council of the day, the accusation is that council knew it was contaminated, therefore that's why they wanted to get rid of it off their hands. Now, I've got no proof of that. I haven't seen anything in writing on council records to say that. Maybe council, maybe councillors, maybe council staff knew verbally that was contaminated and then said, let's get rid of it. But again, it's a wild accusation to make with no proof to say that there is contamination there. And that email on the 7th of January 2020 lays out pretty clearly that we don't know, as a council, don't know if there's any contamination there, but do your own due diligence. Fast forward 28 September 2020, council resolved to proceed with the land swap deal for the council-owned 3.3 hectares in Keswick for the RSL-owned 74 Yindyamarra Street. So, at that stage, council was happy to proceed. RSL was happy to proceed.
Yep.
Land swap. There were some conditions that had to be met by council. It was a complicated deal, overly complicated in my opinion, and I don't love land swaps for a whole range of reasons, and this one in particular was made overly complicated because the land swap didn't happen at the time the deal was signed. There were a number of conditions that had to be met before the change of title actually occurred. So we came along, 22nd of December 2021, election results were declared. So you had a whole new group of councillors. Out of the 10 councillors, 9 were brand new to council. So 9 had nothing to do with all of those dealings with the RSL club up to that point in time. There was a signed contract, and we as a council were not going to come along and rip up signed contracts. We would honour the previous contracts from the previous council.
Well, and that's normal with councils on any contract that's been done in the past. You just don't walk in and rip things up and start again. That's quite normal. State and federal governments do the same thing.
You need to have confidence that after an election that things continue on.
Yep.
So we weren't about to rip it all up. Personally, I thought the whole land swap deal was a bit clumsy and a bit ugly, but the deal was done. And I said that to the RSL club. I said, if I was on council at the time, I wouldn't have done it in this way, but it's been done, so let's all move forward. Now, on 23rd of February 2023, one of the things that we had to do was provide a road in the front of the land for the land that we were giving to the RSL club. And it was a bit silly because the original condition said that there'd be a temporary road provided to get it up and going, and then we'd replace that temporary road with a permanent road. And we as council said, well, that's a bit silly. Wouldn't you just put the permanent road in? So on the 23rd of February 2023, council resolved to replace the temporary road that was part of the original land swap deal with a 4-lane road that was a permanent road, that was the final finished road. And that made sense. We told the RSL club, and they said that all made sense. Now, on the 18th of April 2023, myself and the CEO met with the RSL club at the request of the RSL club because they had a consultant that was going through getting prepared for the building works. So they still didn't own the land. We didn't still own the old Dubbo City Bowling Club, but we were proceeding as if the land swap was going to occur. The consultant engaged by the RSL club, so this isn't council, the consultant engaged said that allegedly they found some contamination on the site. So we met with them and they talked to us and they said, well, council, do you want to fix up the contamination? Do you want to pay for that? We've got a figure that we've been quoted somewhere around the $5-6 million mark to clean up the contamination. And we as council said, no, that's not our responsibility. This is in effect your land. You've bought this land with eyes wide open. So it's up to you to clean up the contamination. So they weren't overly happy about that, but I don't think it would be fair on council, on ratepayers, to spend $5-6 million. We also said, are you sure about that price? Because what you're doing in terms of what you're building there, you probably can treat that in a range of different ways, and that sounds like an expensive price. Why don't you go and get some other consultants? And our CEO suggested a range of different consultants that might be more specialised in this area to find out what it might be. So at this stage, we still had no actual report that we'd commissioned that showed contamination there. We were trusting a report from the RSL club. So,
but hang on, and this is the thing that gets me. The contamination was quoted as being inert contamination in 2020. Now, in 2023, for some unknown reason, has more stuff been dumped there, or again, you've got inert soil contamination in 2020, and all of a sudden we've got all this contamination in 2023, 2024.
So the email you're referring back to, 17th of January 2020, said that the land was not used as a rubbish tip, but rather inert spoil from nearby projects.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the opinion of that staff member that sent that email. But they also, remember, said you need to undertake whatever contamination investigations you deem necessary. So before you bought it, before you went ahead with it, and again, this is where the land swap's a bit clumsy and the conditions on that, if you were just handing over money to buy that land, you would have done all those investigations beforehand. And it would be fair to argue the RSL Club definitely should have done all those investigations. We did our investigations with the old Dubbo City Bowling Club. They should have done the same when they were buying that. So at this stage, 8th of April, go and do some more reports, get some more information. But certainly, from our perspective, we said that we didn't think it was appropriate for council to go and hand over money to go and do all of that work. On the 21st of April 2023, so 3 days after that meeting, in our weekly update that we get from our CEO, the CEO sent an email to all councillors to inform them of the meeting that we held with the RSL Club and the alleged contamination found by the RSL Club consultant and the fact that there's a further study going to be done. Now, if any of our councillors were worried about that contamination, that was a time for them to jump up and down and say, we need to make this public, we need to go forward. But it wasn't really appropriate. The contamination was underground. It wasn't a danger to anyone up on Keswick, and it was land that was in effect owned by the RSL Club, even though the final deeds hadn't been exchanged, but in effect it was owned by them. So there was no need to go out and blast the public. There's lots of contamination around lots of council properties that are owned, from old asbestos that might have been in buildings, etc. There's not a public register of all these ones. If we find one when we're doing any work, then certainly we would tell the public about it. But this one was underground and not deemed a risk. Then fast forward again to 19th of September 2023, and we received a letter from the solicitors acting for the RSL Club, and that gave notice that the club exercised their right of rescission of the land swap deed. Now, again, this is part of my issue that I have, that all these conditions that were built into this contract and the ability for the RSL Club to rescind the deal if all these conditions hadn't been met. So, again, it was just a clumsy contract from the very beginning. Now, they said in this letter that, and I quote, the land swap deed provides that council must register a plan of subdivision to create the council's land. Council has not registered the plan of subdivision and by various dates that had to be met. And then further, accordingly, the purchaser has a right to rescind the land swap deed. So they did that. In that letter, they said it was all based around the fact that we hadn't met the subdivision date. Now, some of those dates or some of those programs that we had were out of our control, so it was difficult to meet those. We'd communicated that with the RSL Club, but they had the legal right to rescind, and they took that offer up. They rescinded that deal. So that's their right, and they've done that. Now, on the 28th of September 2023, we resolved that it be noted that the RSL Memorial Club exercised their right of rescission, and then further from that, essentially, we talked about the fact that on the 15th of September 2023, the RSL provided a site remediation assessment report. It was planned to hold a follow-up meeting with the RSL to address the report findings in coming weeks. However, on the 9th of September, the RSL Club served notice whereby a letter from the RSL's legal advisors advised that the club exercised their right of rescission of the land swap deed. So basically, at that stage, the deal was off. Yep. 20th September 2023, or 9th September, it was effectively off, and we then followed that with a resolution of council to say it's all over and done with. Now, in the meantime, they did an EOI process for the old Dubbo City Bowling Club. We submitted an offer in that EOI process, so we went through that process. Now then, 2nd of April, so remember, now the RSL Club's fully aware from their report that there's contamination on this land and the deal's all off.
Yeah, deal's off.
Yep, that's right.
All gone. 23rd of September. So 2nd of April 2024, it's on again.
So we received a letter from the RSL Club with an offer to sell 74 Yindyamarra Street, the old Dubbo City Bowling Club, to council for $1.5 million. In that same letter, they offered to buy the same parcel of land in Keswick Estate, the same 3.3 hectares that they now know in their reports was contaminated, and the same parcel of land that was subject to a land swap deal, they've offered to buy that same parcel of land for $1.5 million. So basically no money changes hands in net, but they get the same
exchange of contracts, and there is an exchange of ownership.
That's right, with no conditions on that. Yep. It's a cleaner deal. So the same outcome as the original land swap deal, but obviously much cleaner legally. So we still haven't undertaken any remediation works. We still don't have any report that we've commissioned to show contamination. We're trusting a report that the RSL Club had had commissioned. And so essentially we go forward then to 24th of April, and the council meeting on the 24th of April, we resolved to purchase 74 Yindyamarra Street for $1.5 million, and we resolved to sell the Keswick parcel of land for $1.5 million. So as far as we're concerned, end of story. We just need to now exchange the money back and forth and exchange the contracts, job done. But then after all that was done, in Saturday's paper...
30th of April. I've got the paper in front of me.
Yep. And so front page paper on the 27th of April, there's the... Oh, no, that wasn't front page. Sorry, it wasn't front page till the next Tuesday, but there was a letter to the editor from the RSL club that said that the RSL scrapped the deal because of contamination. Even though their legal letter said because of the subdivision, they said they found contamination and they scrapped the deal because of that, even though they've just gone back into the same deal, which doesn't make a lot of sense. There was also accusations made there that essentially the council withheld information from the RSL club, which is a big accusation to make. Then it ended up being front page of the news of the newspaper on the 30th of April, further about the real reason the RSL ditched the deal. And then on the Friday, the 3rd of May, there was information from our CEO, the fact that no information had been withheld from all the records that we had there.
Yeah.
And if I quote from the newspaper from the front page of the 30th of April, the Dubbo RSL Club General Manager, Gus Lyko, has revealed the real reason for the club backflipped on the offer. He claims the pivotal factor, which was not disclosed to the public, was the discovery that the Keswick land was contaminated. And in quotes, this critical information was withheld from us by council staff despite their prior knowledge, close brackets, close quotes, he told the Daily Liberal. So that's a pretty serious accusation. Now, I've got no proof to suggest that that was the case. Again, I've got that email from way back on the 17th of January 2020 to say you need to do your own investigations. We've got no proof there was any contamination, but do your own investigations. So that's an accusation that the last council knew there was contamination and didn't tell the RSL club about that contamination. Again, I've got no proof of that, and I would ask the RSL club to come forward with that proof. But again, I would say, why? What's the point of all this discussion? What's the point of all this? You knew the land was contaminated. You said, let's go back to the same deal we had in the beginning, and we've agreed to that. So let's move forward with it. I don't know why it needs to be brought across unless there's some sort of legal action that the RSL club wants to take to show proof that there was actually some sort of contamination that was known about by our council staff way back in the last council, which again, I have no proof of that. So it's a lot of drama that doesn't need to happen.
It doesn't need to happen.
Because the deal has already been done and we're all moving forward as far as we're concerned.
Anyway, we'll wait and see. Boxcar, a wonderful acronym and one that you might like to tell us a little bit more about and what the acronym actually stands for. I know the word crime is in there somewhere.
So BOXAR stands for Bureau of Crime Statistics and Research. Now, right. I have regular conversations, mainly by email, but sometimes via phone, with representatives from BOXAR because the data comes out on a quarterly basis for crime stats across the state. So BOXAR is a state government authority. And I'm intrigued in those. I want to get information on those and I want to do some comparisons. And so I do like to get information from them about a whole range of things. Based on that, and also some of our staff have seen some presentations by BOXAR reps in the past, they said it might be worthwhile to get a BOXAR rep to come along to Dubbo and do a workshop. Now, we have workshops on a regular basis with councillors. Most councillors know that keep their Thursday nights free. Twice a month you've got either a committee meeting or a council meeting. The other Thursday nights are often taken up with workshops. So keep those nights free. So we had a workshop with BOXAR.
All right, you've got the rep here, and we're going to get information. The general feeling around town is that there is a crime wave.
And crime wave,
a crime wave in Dubbo. There's a crime wave in Parkes. There's a crime wave everywhere in Western New South Wales, Moree, for instance. And I am interested to hear what the actual statistics are, and not the general feeling around the place at the moment.
So one of the great frustrations that I have with BOXAR, and I've communicated this previously and again on Thursday night, is that the data is very slow to come out. Yeah. So to give you an idea, it comes out quarterly. So the first quarter of this year, 1st of January through to the 31st of March, we'll get the data for crime across the state in that quarter, the middle of June. So it's a long time after the actual crime information is there. Now, I meet with the police on a regular basis. The police have some data that they can share with me. They usually come to those meetings with a little bit of data on some recent crime stats, but they say to me, here's data that's not verified yet. It's our draft data. You can't talk about this outside this room. You can't use this information in any way, shape or form. It's for your background information. So that information, which is information that's fed through to Boxar, but Boxar like to have that delay in time because there are changes to that data sometimes. There's information that needs to be updated and changed. So in answer to your question, no, Boxar the person we had there on Thursday night, I won't mention her name, but she's a doctor of philosophy, so she's got a PhD in the crime what? I don't know exactly crime stats, but certainly a PhD in this area. She's got a lot of experience working for Boxar and also obviously an academic background. So she was very good, and she knew her data inside and out. She knew the information there, and she was very passionate about this information and getting this information reported on correctly. So she understands the frustration with the time delay, but she had good reasons for that time delay to make sure that that data is consistent. And she talked about that crime wave, crime spree. She said, definitely not. There is not a crime spree, a crime wave. And when you look at the data, and again, and we made this point on Thursday night, you can slice and dice data in any way you want to either make data look good or bad, depending on how you feel like slicing it. One of the bits of data that she put up to show initially was, let's look at a 20-year trend, and the 20-year trend that she had was a 20-year trend against population. So it wasn't just the raw numbers. It wasn't just the raw numbers per capita, but one of the comments that I made, I was on the Today Show some time ago when people said, I supposedly said there was no crime, and at no stage have I said there's no crime. I've said there's no crime spree. I said there's no crime wave, but there's obviously crime. There's crime across the entire state. There's crime across the entire world. There's obviously crime, and I've never said there's no crime, despite some people conveniently saying that I said there was no crime. But in particular, when she looks at that crime, and one of the comments I made on the Today Show was that crime goes up because our population increases. You have more people in an area, you're going to have more crime. But she did a graph that showed 20-year crime when you actually take into not just per capita, but the growth as well. So in other words, real changes in crime. And she showed that crime's gone down over the last 20 years. And not just down a little bit, it's actually gone down quite significantly over the last 20 years, which is quite fascinating.
That's a wonderful stat, and I'm not going to disagree with it for one moment. But someone who has had their car pinched or their house broken into are going to be seriously aggrieved by all that, and they are going to tell other people, and other people have other stories about houses being broken into or purses being pinched down the street or whatever. And this is the rumour mill and the social media that has to be overcome.
Yeah, that's right.
And
so crime numbers have still gone up, though. So this is the thing to keep in mind, that when you do a real comparison, as in a bit like when you say how much you're earning now, a lot more than you earned 50 years ago, but is it more in real terms? So crime numbers have gone up. So there's no doubt about that at all. Yeah. So people that you're talking about, absolutely. And it's a very personal thing. I haven't had cars stolen. I've had cars broken into. I've had houses broken into. I've had things stolen from shops. So it's a very personal thing, especially when someone's been in your home. That's a very personal. Someone's invaded your space. That has a real psychological impact.
And the quote is that council aren't doing enough. The police aren't doing enough. In fact, not enough's being done about crime. Full stop, pens down, because these people are aggrieved.
That's right. And without doubt, I understand absolutely why people feel that way. So again, the idea of having Boxar come along and talk to us is to drill down to this and look at that. Now, some other information that's quite interesting that comes out of that. So again, in real terms, crime's gone down, but that doesn't make you feel better when your house got broken into. In terms of crime overall, there is a direct correlation between CEFA, the Socioeconomic Index for Areas, the CEFA score. And the CEFA score gives you places of advantage and places of disadvantage. To give you an idea, in the top 10 CEFA scores across the nation, about 6 of those are in Sydney suburbs. So I'm talking about places like Woollahra, I'm talking about Ku-ring-gai, Mossman, some of those areas that if you just said to people, gee, they're well-to-do areas, absolutely right, and the CIFA score shows that. Now, and I've, again, these conversations I've had with Boxar before, they've sent me some interesting articles that I've read and gone through and looked at those to absorb that, to see what I can pull out of those. There is a direct correlation between crime stats and CIFA scores. And when you think about it, that makes sense. If I live in Wallara and I earn good money and I've got a very nice house in Wallara and many people around me are the same, it's probably less likely someone's going to break in because people in Wallara have got enough money and people in Wallara probably have better security systems on their nice houses, so the crime is going to be less in Wallara. If I go to the other extreme and I go to somewhere that's got a very low CIFA score, I'm talking about a Bourke or a Bree or a Walgett, some of those areas.
Or a Marylands in Sydney or a Blacktown in Sydney. Let's spread it around, not just in this area. Yeah,
absolutely spot on. You've got lower levels of employment. You've got lower levels of income, lower levels of home ownership, people that might be living on the street. So logic says you're going to have higher crime levels in those areas. Does that make it right? No, it doesn't. But there's a reason that you get some higher crime levels in regional areas. And the reason I bring that up is, how do you address that? Well, how do you change a CIFA score for an area? It's not something simple that council says, oh, I've got an idea. As the mayor, I've got a policy that'll just change this little part here and that'll fix all the crime. Changing a CIFA score, well, in fact, the renewables that we've talked about earlier in this podcast, in terms of changing that basic economy of Wellington, that has a better chance of changing crime than anything council could do. If we basically change that economy, get more people in work earning good money, the CIFA score will improve and the crime levels will go down. And there's a range of reasons. It's not just about, hey, let's give people some extra money and the CIFA score will improve and that'll fix it. There's probably a reason that you've got lower levels of employment or lower income in terms of some issues that people have had, maybe from a family perspective, maybe family abuse, a whole range of things. The particular person that we had on Thursday night, in some of previous discussions I've had with her, she sent me an article that was written by, it was a thesis that was written essentially on how to reduce crime. And there were 6 key indicators in there on how to reduce crime. None of those 6 council has any control over whatsoever. And this is the issue. So we went through this, we looked at the crime data. Yes, crime is higher in regional areas.
I understand that council, can't do anything about it, but people out there think that council should be doing something about it. How do you overcome those perceptions?
Well, again, and I do say to people, when people contact me and say, can you fix the crime? I say, I don't know how council can fix the crime. I'm being quite honest. Again,
I agree with you, but there are a perception out there that council should be doing something.
So, and what I say to people is, I will always be honest with the public in what I can and can't do. I'm being very honest with people when I say, I don't know. I literally do not know what council can do within the powers that we have available to us to solve the crime issues. Any councillor or anyone from a council that says we can solve crime, I think is lying. I think they're not telling the truth to the community. It might sound pretty good, Richard. It might sound pretty good if I say, hey, come and support me or vote for me because I'll solve crime issues. Well, tell me how you're going to solve those crime issues. And I don't know a way. But what I do say to people is, tell me a way that we can solve these crime issues. And if it's in council's power, more than happy to implement it. To this day, with the people that have contacted me about crime, I am yet to see someone say, oh, here's an idea that we can implement to solve crime issues. Now, I said the same to this person on Thursday night. I said, we've got all this data here. It shows that crime is higher in regional areas, not just Dubbo, across the entire state, across the entire nation. Crime is higher in regional areas, and the CIFA score is a pretty strong indicator of that. So it's not just Dubbo. There's no crime wave in Dubbo. There's no crime spree in Dubbo. It's across the entire board that there is crime, without a doubt. We'd like to see that improved. One of the things that's interesting, and we talked about this, is that we've got an increase in crime in real numbers, in outright numbers, there's an increase in crime. So we know that. And I did some comparisons because, again, I like to pull apart this data as much as I can, which is why I go back to Boxar from time to time to say, hey, I'm doing this. Does this look right? And is this pulling apart the data? This is what they spend all their day on, so I want to use their expertise. One of the things that I looked at was the pre-pandemic crime levels, crime numbers, outright crime numbers, across the state this was, and then the post-pandemic. So pandemic, lots of things change. So let's kind of almost ignore that little period in the middle. So before the pandemic, after the pandemic, it was a 5-year time frame I took from before and after. Crime had gone up in outright numbers marginally. So it had gone up a little bit. So in real numbers, it's probably gone down, but in outright numbers, gone up marginally. The prison population over that same time period had gone down by 12.2%. Now, the only outcome, the only reason I can see for that is that magistrates are less likely to put people behind bars. And this is where I hear feedback from the community saying, I can't believe the guy that did this to my car or stole this from my house or whatever. The magistrate said, have a nice day. Don't do that again. Be a nice person. Where's the disincentive to go out there and do it again because people are being bailed continually? And this is a big complaint from the community. Can council control that? No, of course we can't.
They can't. But it is a great, and we could go on for hours about this. And when we get down to the bail situation, and you look at the failure of the bail situation directly in Dubbo with the Molly Ticehurst situation. Now, as a council, you can't go into that. As a citizen, I can't go into that. But certainly I can approach our state and federal members and say, what are you blokes doing about this? And as you say, it can't and will never be a council issue.
It can't be. And we do certainly do that. There are letters, there are conversations that are communicated from council to the state government mainly, and sometimes the federal government, because the state controls the police. The state controls the sentencing regime. Now, the state doesn't control the magistrates. The magistrates are independent. They make their sentencing decisions independent, but they've got the sentencing regime to stick to. So there are certain minimum and maximums of sentencing.
They make their independent decisions to the frustration of police, prosecutors, and to the frustration of citizens generally.
Yeah.
But that's our system, our Westminster system of democracy, and it must be upheld.
And the state government could solve some of these problems by changing the sentencing regime. In other words, the minimum for all of these break and enter, all of these property crimes we're talking about, the minimum is usually nothing. So the magistrate's got the discretion to go to a maximum and wait under nothing. If there were minimum sentences or repeat offenders, if after a certain number of repeat offences you are going to go to prison, take that discretion away from the magistrates, that might change it. But I found that stat quite amazing about the fact that prison population has dropped by 12.2% over that 5-year time frame. The other one that I looked at, and again I've had discussions before with Boxer about this, is what I often do is I say, you've got a certain level of crime, it's almost a baseline now. It'll be wonderful to click your fingers and magically change that dramatically, but again, from a CIFA score perspective, we know that's not going to happen. What I do is I look at the various crime categories each quarter when those stats come out, and I do a comparison. How did we go, Dubbo Regional Council LGA, in a comparison to last quarter? So did that category of crime go up or down? How are the police going? How are the magistrates going in these different areas? And that's what I suppose I spend more time on, because I want to see change. I want to see change in the right direction, obviously. So I'm not going to say tomorrow our crime is going to be at the same level as Wallara. That's unrealistic.
Oh, yeah.
And again, I can't influence that, but I can see how it changes. The other one that's fascinating is that I've had people say to me, I feel safer walking down the main street of Dubbo than I do walking down the main street of, say, a Blacktown or a Campbelltown or some various suburbs throughout Sydney. And you think, why is that? Because if you look at the data on a per capita basis, some of those crime stats show that it's higher in Dubbo than it is in a Blacktown or a various ones on a per capita basis. But the difference is you've got a lot more people living in a small area in some of those suburbs in Sydney. So if I walk 100 metres in Dubbo and I walk past so many people, in terms of the population density we have, walk down the main street of Dubbo, I would go past X number of people. If I walk down 100 metres down the main street of a suburb in Sydney, because of much higher population density, I'm going past a lot more people. So even though the per capita rate might be lower in that Sydney suburb, because I'm being exposed to a lot more people in a shorter length of area, then the likelihood of my car being broken into or the likelihood of something happening to me personally might be higher. So it gets complicated when you start to talk about population densities in all of that as well. So it is complicated. What we would love to do is to make people feel safe. So I said to this expert, with all the conversations we've had over the years, with all the information, please tell me, you know this information inside out. What can council do? What is within the powers of council to do to
Well, I
reduce
think
that?
council can do one thing, and that's educate people not to leave their keys in their car, not to leave their keys at the front door on a hook, so someone can break in, pinch the car, because as you well know, cars these days can't be hot wired, they're all electronic, and so people have got to pinch the keys to get the car started to take it away.
So using stats to this person's advantage, when I said that question, I said, what can we possibly do as a council? She said, well, here's one of the stats that's quite interesting. Exactly as you said, modern cars are difficult to hotwire.
Educate people.
It's easier for people to break in and steal keys. 22% of the break and enters, and this isn't just Dubbo, this is across all the data that she had, 22% of break and enters are done specifically to steal a car. So even though they've broken into your house, they didn't want to break into your house. They just wanted your car. Now,
but the cars they want are either Porsche, BMW or Mercedes-Benz. Have you noticed that?
well, they certainly want nice cars. But if you leave your key sitting on the kitchen table, they stick their head up to the window, they see a key sitting there and they go, great, I can just break this window, steal that key and I'm away in their car. So one of the things she said was what council can do is maybe a little bit of stuff around the edges with some education. So say to people, don't leave your keys on the kitchen bench.
Or a hook at the front door.
Something like that. Don't leave it anywhere that's obvious and easy to see. She mentioned the old lock it or lose it signs, those sort of things. She said, don't leave a phone sitting in your car at the car park. Oh. Someone smashed the window. Now, years ago, actually, it was a bit of fun I had one day with the police. We were doing a bit of this education. This is back when I was mayor previously. And so what we did was I had some police with me, so it was obvious I wasn't trying to break into cars. And we walked along Talbragar Street. I don't think we did Macquarie Street. I'm sure it was Talbragar Street. And we tried, I literally walked up to each car and I'd try the handle to see if I could open the car door and I'd look in to see if there's anything attractive in there. Now, again, if someone came in and said, hey, Mr. Mayor, what are you doing breaking into my car? I had the police with me to show that I was going along doing it in a way that was trying to demonstrate this. And I was fascinated. I can't remember how many, but I was fascinated when I'd go along and I'd go, oh, here's another car that's open. We'd walk along another, 10 or 20 cars. Oh, here's another car that's open. The number of wallets or mobile phones we saw sitting in the dash of cars, and that's the conclusion of this, and this we did a bit of media around it, to basically show to people, lock your cars, put away your belongings. And I know I do exactly that. I make sure my car is locked everywhere. Even when it's at my house, I make sure my car is locked. But also, I'm always conscious of making sure there's nothing. I normally have a drink bottle in my car, and I'm thinking if they want to steal a $2 drink bottle, then go for it. But it's probably not worth breaking into my car to steal a plastic drink bottle. So it's that sort of thing. So education, and we've got a community safety plan we've been working on for some time. And I'm sure out of that...
I noticed that's in the budget.
Yeah, that's in the budget as well. But again, as a result of that, that's the sort of thing that we're talking about, is some little things around the edges. We can't change the policing. We can't tell the police. I mean, I have a very good relationship with the police, but I can't direct them what to do. We can't tell the magistrates what to do. I've met with magistrates before and they've made it very clear to me that the sentencing process is independent. So that was all interesting. So basically the conclusion was you can fiddle around the edges a little bit with a bit of education, but also the police are doing that anyway. They're doing some of that education, but that's something that we can be a little bit more involved with. The other thing I said to her was, is there any value in me as the mayor or councillors and council jumping up and down and saying, oh my gosh, we've got crime, this is terrible, what are we going to do about it? What can someone do to help us solve these crime issues? And she said, well, in terms of the reputation the community gets from doing that, it takes a long time to overcome. So in essence, and we did talk about the Gordon estate from many years ago, and that I think that took half a generation to get past that.
And it took Wellington to get over being called Antarctica about 10 to 15 years because it was supposedly the ice capital of Australia.
Well, I actually think that's still there now, and one of our councillors spoke about that on Thursday night, saying that people still refer to Wellington as an ice capital. So me personally, Richard, as the mayor, I will never jump up and down and say in public, national media, we've got a crime wave, we've got a crime spree, we've got to fix this crime spree. Behind the scenes, I certainly have discussions with various police ministers, various authorities to say, what can we do about this crime with the police, with magistrates, all the rest of it. I'll have those conversations behind closed doors, but I'm never going to jump up and down in the public on national media. And what we would see is what's happening in Moree and what's happening in Alice Springs. Businesses suffer. Tourism is decimated. Imagine what would happen to the numbers at the zoo if I jumped up and down about it. And from this person in box are, it doesn't actually solve any of the problems. Jumping up and down about it doesn't solve any problems in terms of crime. All it does is harms the businesses, harms the community, and gives a reputation to the community that takes a long time to get over. So I still think the approach we're taking to crime is right. I think a bit more education, and I might do that again. I might talk to the police and do that same thing I did years ago, where I go along and try and pretend to break into cars and see how many I'm successful with just by trying the door handle and seeing what's in there that's attractive to break into. I think that sort of thing, but again, I'm never going to jump up and down. So those people that want me to be out there on the front page of the Daily Telegraph or on the Today Show every day saying crime's terrible, then they're going to be disappointed. And the main reason for that is, again, I'm not trying to harm Dubbo's reputation, but also I think I'm lying to the community by me doing that, saying I'm going to solve crime problems. It's up to the state government, essentially, to solve these crime problems, and we'll support them behind the scenes everywhere we can, but they are the lead agency. The police and the sentencing regimes, that's where these problems will be solved. And again, that drop in prison population, I think that's something that the community is very interested in.
Well, you've got a very busy week coming up. Lots of things happening to finish up this week on, and a limerick. But what's happening for the rest of the week?
Well, I'll do my limerick first, and then lots of things happening.
You're going to do your limerick first?
I'll do my limerick first.
Yeah. Oh, righto.
Is that all right? I know you're warming to my limericks.
Last week I gave you 6 out of 10, so this better be good.
Well, gee, there's a bit of pressure on now. So this week's all about, of course, the budget. Budget submissions are open to 3rd of June. So here we go. We will shape Dubbo's path hand in hand with your feedback that's bold and not bland. For the roads that we mend and the budgets we tend, help councillors build a future so grand.
7.
Oh, I'm going better. So lots of things this week, but the main thing on this week that I'd like to mention is our standing committee meetings. They're not council meetings, so we don't make council resolutions at these meetings, but lots of information out there for the public. So Thursday, 5:30 p.m. The papers are out on Monday if you're to go through and look at those.
Straight from the mayor's mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.